Hello, everyone. This is Parrish Alford with the Daily Journal. I'm joined by Logan Lowery, our Mississippi State beat writer, and our special guest, Tom Murphy of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. This is Double Coverage, a production of the Daily Journal. We thank you for clicking in with us today. And we're going to talk all things Mississippi State and Ole Miss for the next half hour or so. And we'll learn about the Hogs, too. Tom will enlighten us in advance of the Ole Miss-Arkansas game in Little Rock. Thanks again for being with us. Logan, how are you, man? What's going on?
Well, I'm enjoying this bye week, and it comes right in the middle, dead slap in the middle of the season. So it couldn't come at a better time. Get a little bit of a reprieve from football for a little bit this week. Still had a couple of media availabilities this week, but just kind of taking it easy for a time change. Do a little recruiting story this weekend and catching up on that a little bit, but just enjoying just that little bit of a break that we get, because football season is such a routine from August to December. You enjoy this 1 week that you get off, and looking at next season, you get 2 weekends off.
That's right. Recruiting you have with you always. Mississippi State coming off the 23-9 win over then number 8 Auburn. Tom, great time to be a Falcons fan, man, or Atlanta sports fan. I see you with the golf shirt there. I was most appreciative of the Falcons giving up that game-winning drive to the Saints. Nice to see the Braves win the division, but that's kind of where that ends. How's everything going?
Yeah, you went right there on the Falcons, didn't you? But what this shows is that I still support the team, even though we're struggling right now. So the team I cover is 1-5, and the team I love is 1-4. So not a lot of victories going on right now in my world.
Well, look, let's get right to it. Tell us about Arkansas. Let's go back to that North Texas game. I would imagine that's been the low point of Arkansas football for several years. How did the team respond after that? How do they stay together? Because obviously they've improved from that point.
It's interesting that you asked that, because right now I'm in the middle of writing my halfway through the season evaluation, and I just wrote that line that Chad Morris and his staff have to hope that back-to-back games, the Colorado State game where they blew a 18-point lead in the midway late in the third quarter, and then the home performance against North Texas, it was really just abominable. Have to be, they have to hope those are the low points of his career here. And based on what we've seen in the last 3 weeks, you could make a case that's going to happen, because they've just looked a lot better. And I think that the uncertainty at quarterback, Ty Storey, Cole Kelly, they flip-flopped the first 3 games, and then the North Texas performance when Kelly threw 4 interceptions when they thought they would be able to beat North Texas deep, and it turned out that North Texas's pass rush allowed them to play man on the edges, and Arkansas just could not defeat it. Wound up being the key component of that game, and between the fake fair catch punt return and some other weirdness and the 4 interceptions, they couldn't overcome that. And so there were boos in the crowd, and it was a very, very low point. What they've done to their credit, I think they've kept the locker room together. They've decided that Ty Storey is their starter, but they've kept a package with Cole Kelly in short yardage that's been actually very productive the last couple of games. And it all kind of, their slow build kind of came to a head last week when they found very legitimate ways to move the ball against Alabama. I mean, 6 of 12 third down conversions and 405 total yards against Alabama is nothing to sneeze at. Now, they were torched by Tua and that offense that is just incredible, but they're playing better. And now that they're through with the 3-game gauntlet of at Auburn, Texas A&M at a neutral site, and the Alabama game, they feel like the second half of the schedule, they might be able to get some wins in there. And obviously it starts on Saturday against a team that on paper and in Las Vegas is favored over them, but somehow or the other they've won 4 in a row against. So it's been a weird series, and the Razorbacks and their fans are hoping that there are better things to come in the second half.
Yeah, it has been a weird series, Tom. I just don't think it gets much more weird than that. Just throw it as high as you can lateral back in 2015. And that one play ends up keeping Ole Miss out of the SEC championship game in Atlanta. The Rebels still searching for their first appearance there. Tom, Ole Miss thinks they're going to get a big, heavy dose of the run in this game. What do you think?
Well, Arkansas's had one really blowout running game, and that was the one at Colorado State, but they couldn't finish off those drives with touchdowns, and that ultimately cost them a win. Otherwise, pretty average. They ran for a 172 on Alabama last week, and so they probably feel that they can kind of keep it balanced. And then when you look at all the injuries and what's happening in the Ole Miss secondary, they've got to feel like they can move the ball in both ways. So Devwall Whaley has been out with a concussion since the Auburn game, so he's missed 2 in a row. But in his place, Rakeem Boyd, a Texas A&M signee from a few years back who was in Last Chance U, has really risen up. And he ran for 102 against Alabama last week. And I think now that's a pretty strong two-headed monster at tailback with he and Devwall Whaley. So they'll probably feed those guys. And what Ole Miss has to be wary of, in addition to a lot of the things Arkansas has shown with run-pass options under Morris, is last week they dumped in some middle screens to their tight ends, and they hit some swing passes to their running backs that were very effective in slowing the Alabama pass rush. So obviously they're trying to keep it kind of balanced, but I do think that they're going to give a strong effort to the run game.
You mentioned that Arkansas was torched by Tua and the Tide, and lots of people have been. Certainly, Ole Miss can feel that pain. But how do you think Arkansas matches up with this Ole Miss passing game?
Well, the first half of last year, and that was Jordan Ta'amu's first start, and he blew them up in the first half. It was 31-7 maybe late in the first half of that game. Before the fumble, and Ole Miss was moving the ball again, the Santos Ramirez stripped the fumble away, and they recovered and went down and scored, and that flipped the momentum. And they just played better in the second half of that game. But I'm certain Jordan Ta'amu has improved, and the Razorback defenders who were in our interviews yesterday talked about how he really reads defenses and makes good decisions in their RPO game. And so it's going to be a harder to defend for Arkansas. Now, one area that they're better, their front seven gets a little bit more pressure. I don't know how that's going to play out against Ole Miss, but they've done better in that respect, and their run defense is better. I think John Chavis has felt a little bit energized here from what he's been through the last several years at LSU and A&M, and he had them playing pretty well before last week.
Logan, you got anything you need to know about the Hogs before we let Tom go?
Well, I was going to ask him about this Little Rock game. I know Arkansas plays, once or twice a year down there in Little Rock. Just what is kind of the core fan base there in Fayetteville? How do they feel about that game going down to Little Rock every year, keeping a game outside of Reynolds Stadium there?
Well, over the years, it's gone from having several games there to a couple, and then the great stadium debate was raging in 2000 when I think they dropped it down to one game. And, Frank Broyles took a lot of heat for that. But at that time, the Reynolds Razorback Stadium was being expanded, and it went to 72,000, and it made more sense financially. Now, obviously, a huge section of their fan base is down there in the metro area around Little Rock and around the state. So centered up here in the Northwest, a lot of fans have to travel a long way. And I think the Board of Trustees last year, this all played into the Jeff Long firing, in November last year. They felt that Jeff Long was of the mind to pull out of Little Rock altogether. And this new regime with Hunter Yurachek, a much more open, engaging athletic director, they've embraced Little Rock. I think the Board of Trustees had made it clear to him and Chad Morris how important Central Arkansas and the rest of the state is to this fan base. And so they've embraced it, and they've signed on to a deal now. They're playing Ole Miss, and then they're going to have spring games there as they did this year. And then the Missouri game will become a staple in the near future. So they've kind of re-engaged because Little Rock, since the Ole Miss game of 12, and then they had Georgia in 14, they had not hosted an SEC game there, and the attendance had started to dwindle a little bit. And, only 49,000 were in Razorback Stadium last week. And I think they're thinking in Little Rock that they can outdraw that. And so it's important for them to keep attendance up for the long-term viability of the Razorbacks in Little Rock.
Tom, you say that the majority of fans are there in the metro area around Little Rock, but what do you think really the percentages are? Because when I'm in Fayetteville, that looks like such a growth spot for the state of Arkansas right now. That northwest area, the 3 cities there. I mean, I see new businesses and retail and everything. It's obviously it goes both ways, so it's a burden for those people when it's in Little Rock. How do you think that plays out?
Well, when I said majority of fans of Little Rock, I guess I might have misspoke there a little bit. There's a nice percentage of fans there. But obviously here in Northwest, this I-49 corridor has just grown and grown and grown. And with all the big businesses here, Walmart headquarters and J.B. Hunt and Tyson, the population continues to expand. And as you mentioned, retail business and enrollment in the school has continued to go up. So, the vast majority of the fans are right here, but there's still a big percentage of fans around the state. And obviously Little Rock's the biggest city. So I think it was important for the current administration to realize what Little Rock means to this state and to this program. They're a little bit different from other schools that have played games in 2 locales. And so I covered Bama back in the day. Tuscaloosa is more centrally located and not far from Birmingham. So the Birmingham game made sense there. When the Mississippi schools played in Jackson more frequently, they were a little more centrally located and could get to Jackson easier and their fan bases could. Arkansas is a different story, being up here far in the northwest corner. So I guess they're one of the very few last teams that play a second game in a second site that they call home. And even the Arlington game they considered to be a home game. So a pretty unique situation for the Razorbacks.
Hey, Tom, thanks for being with us, man. We appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you there in Little Rock.
You betcha, Parrish. Logan, I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom.
All right. Well, that was Tom Murphy of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, longtime beat writer for the Razorbacks, covering the Razorbacks. Logan, I'll tell you, man, nothing makes me more pleased than the fact that we don't have to deal with the game in Jackson, State or Ole Miss, that we don't have to go down there for a home game. Look, I mean, back in the day, those stadiums in those areas, those bigger cities, those were the nicer stadiums. Those were the bigger stadiums. It's not that way anymore with the growth on everybody's campus. The campus stadium is larger. The campus stadium is nicer. That's where the renovations have been through the years. Everything has been put toward the campus stadium, and most SEC schools who did play away like that have kind of gotten away from that. And Arkansas, as you heard Tom explain the political landscape there, it's still very much a thing with them. Logan, do you miss going to Jackson?
I've never been to Jackson as far as actually covered. I've been inside that stadium for some of the Dandy Dozen photo shoots and stuff back when I was doing recruiting, but I've never actually covered a game there. But, a funny story about the whole Arkansas, Little Rock, Fayetteville situation. Fayetteville was actually the last SEC stadium that I went to. I went to all 13 stadiums before I actually made it to Fayetteville because when I first started covering Mississippi State played them in Little Rock, 2 or 3 times before I ever got to go to Razorback Stadium up there in Fayetteville. So out of all the 14, I even had been to A&M in Missouri before I'd ever been to Arkansas and Fayetteville up there. So, it's just kind of a neat situation. It's actually a closer drive for you and I coming from Mississippi to make that Little Rock trip. And, I've already said on the show a couple of times, I'm not the biggest fan of the state of Arkansas as far as, just visiting there. So, the less time I get to spend there, the better. But I'm always looking for good things to do there. And when I finally made it to Fayetteville, I had a good time. I went out on the little strip there that they had. They've got a nice little strip of bars and restaurants to go eat. And I'm starting to come around to Arkansas, so don't think I'm just totally bashing there. I'm growing towards, finding places to like about it. And, hopefully the more I visit there, the more I'll find and more fun I'll have there.
Well, I will tell you what, I will miss seeing the campus this weekend. Beautiful area up there in Northwest Arkansas. But when the game is over, I will be very excited that I'm starting my journey back from Little Rock and not 3 hours up the road from Fayetteville. So there's that good about it. But I'll tell you this, Logan, about the state of Arkansas, and then we'll get on MSU and Auburn, last week's game. I'm an outdoors enthusiast. I'd gone to the Smoky Mountains for years. And then for years, I'd driven right around the Ozarks on I-40 and turned up that I-49 and gone up to Fayetteville, and had never gone into the Ozarks. I guess I was kind of a mountain snob. But then I went canoeing on the Buffalo River a couple of summers ago after hearing so many different people talk about it. And, got some great spots there, Logan, really some phenomenal nature there in the Ozarks, a lot of beauty, a lot of God's earth right there, lots of good spots. And in fact, Laurie and I, my wife, are going that way, and we'll do some hiking and walking around in the Ozarks on Friday, and then head on back down to Little Rock. So anyway, Logan, tell us how Joe Moorhead took a despondent Mississippi State fan base and helped it make a complete 180-degree turn in a week.
Yeah, and I'm going back to Arkansas right before I get to that. I think I just need to go when it's warmer. Every time I go there, it's 30 and below. And I went for basketball one time, and it was 1 degree. So I need to go when it's warmer, and I might have a little bit more fun. Yeah, but looking at State in the Auburn game this past weekend, they did exactly what he said he was going to do last week. He said he was going to run the ball more. He was going to give more design runs for the running backs. And looking at that thing, they ran the ball 57 times the other night, 57 runs for 349 yards and 2 touchdowns. And, Nick Fitzgerald ran for 195 yards. Kylan Hill ran for 126. So they controlled the clock through run the game. The time of possession ratio, I think State was close to 42 minutes. Auburn only had the ball for 18 minutes of that ball game. So, they just controlled the clock. Some turnovers played a role in the time of possession, but State just dominated the line of scrimmage on offense. And, the offensive line the previous 2 weeks in those losses to Kentucky and Florida, State's offensive line are not great pass blockers, especially there on the edge. But you get them run blocking, get those big guys going downhill, they do a pretty good job with that. So, and I think a lot of it was Joe Moorhead finding what his team, the makeup of his team, what that team does well, and play into those strengths. And Moorhead in the past, he's always had a guy that could throw the ball downfield and make plays in the passing game. That's really not Nick Fitzgerald's game. He's improved a little bit in that regard, but that's really not what he does best. He's a running quarterback, and they played to that strength the other night, and he broke Tim Tebow's career rushing record in that game. He now has 2,999 yards rushing in his career, so he's 1 yard shy of 3,000. But he passed Tim Tebow the other night and did so in a pretty amazing. It was like a 39-yard run that he broke Tim Tebow's record on. So just a good night for him running the football. Still got a long way to go in the passing game. Only threw for 69 yards and had a bad interception the other night. Completed 9 of 17 passes in that game. But in those 17 passes that he dropped back there, he was not sacked at all. So the offensive line maybe turning the corner there as far as their pass blocking, but it's kind of some of the stuff that they're focusing on this week. And Joe Moorhead alluded to it a little bit last night that even though he knows the strength of the team is running the football, there's going to be some games down the line where they're going to have to rely on that passing game to not only move the chains but also to put points up. So they're not going to just scrap the passing game because they had so much success running the ball the other night and beat a top 10 team. They're going to continue to work on that pass and try to get Fitzgerald's completion percentage up, and try to get some of those wide receivers some confidence in getting the ball in their hands and stuff. So we'll have to see how that progresses moving forward. But right now that's their focus this week. They're not. I asked him last night, when are you going to start on LSU? Are you going to get a jump start on that? And the coaching staff are going to try to get their game plan together over the next couple of days and then hit the road recruiting. But the team itself isn't actually going to start practicing for LSU until Sunday, and that's the normal day they usually start preparing for an opponent.
How healthy is State right now?
They've got some guys banged up. Now, the main injury that they have right now is Jamal Peters at cornerback. He's missed the last 3 games, but Joe Moorhead said he's made a little bit of an improvement. They've upgraded him to out indefinitely to kind of a day-to-day situation. I think they were going to reevaluate him at the start of next week. And, he said, I think they said they were cautiously optimistic he might be able to play in this next game at LSU next weekend. So we'll have to see how that progresses. That would be a big boost to their secondary to get him back, a senior, a big guy, 6'2", 225, playing cornerback that can move like that would be a huge boost. They got a couple of other bumps and bruises. Darrell Williams missed the game the other night. Their starting left guard. He dressed out but did not play. That's something to kind of watch out for. Just some guys are banged and bruised, but nothing major. I guess Marquise Spencer, the defensive end, is really the only injury they've had this year. He's had shoulder surgery. He's out for the rest of the year, but he was kind of a role player along that defensive line and has a redshirt year available. So they'll still have a couple of years of eligibility with him when he comes back next year.
Logan, I keep a group text thread going with a bunch of college friends, and there was some discussion last week about, hey, are we all going to get together at ULM for homecoming? And I said, guys, I'm going to watch ULM for homecoming this week because it was homecoming for the Rebels, and ULM was there, the university formerly known as Northeast Louisiana. Logan, a 70-21 win for Ole Miss. It was disappointing to see the alma mater not compete a little bit better. This was supposed to be a better year for them. It doesn't look like that way right now, even though they got a fairly nice win against Southern Miss in pocket. 70-21, Ole Miss wins last week. Could have been different. It got out of hand early in the first quarter. It could have been competitive for a longer period, I should say. The Warhawks had 2 turnovers in the red zone going in. You can't do that. One of those inside the 5, and Ole Miss got the ball back and scored. Ole Miss scored touchdowns on its first 9 possessions in that game. So, really that game was not very close at all. Could have been competitive a little longer, but overall it's kind of the trend of what Ole Miss has been in non-conference games. Well, the Rebels are hoping to translate that to the SEC. Now they're not playing Alabama or LSU. They're playing a team that on paper, statistically, they look like they match up pretty well off from offense to defense. So we'll see. A couple of bright spots to come out of the ULM game. Number one was backup quarterback Matt Corral, the 4-star freshman from Long Beach, got in the game, started the second half. Now, all of the Ole Miss starters did not come out at the start of the second half. Ole Miss had 49 points then. They could have, but they let Corral play a couple of series with the starters, with the first team, before all of those other guys came out. And Matt Corral on his first series scored on a 61-yard run and really kind of showed some intelligence there with the reads that he made and how he explained it, what he was seeing and what he was looking for, later on in interviews. He made good reads, and that opened up some things, and he felt like he had one guy left and he thought he had a chance to beat him, and he did, and it turned into a 61-yard touchdown. He also was 10 for 10 passing for 143 yards and 2 touchdowns. And certainly you take the caliber of opponent into consideration, but for Ole Miss, it looks like they're going to hand it off to a pretty good quarterback when Jordan Tiamu is finished after this season. So good showing for Matt Corral. And defensively, Ole Miss held the Warhawks, a running football team, to 130 yards. They're trying to take some confidence from that game into this Arkansas game. But look, you're going to see a deeper, more talented run game with a lot of motion. And that's kind of the thing the Rebels have to watch this week. Arkansas is going to throw a lot of eye candy out there with this player going this way and that one going that way, and just trying to confuse things before the snap. Look, Ole Miss is giving up a lot of yards on the ground this year, maybe 208, I believe, is the figure, which is down from last year. But when you throw in the fact that they have all those injuries in the secondary, plus the young linebackers, a lot of freshmen getting a lot of snaps. Kind of the leader is Mohamed Sanago, just a sophomore. That motion becomes a concern, I believe, because these guys are going to have to really be disciplined with their eyes and make sure that they are in the right place to have a chance to slow down this Arkansas run game. So we'll see if they're able to build from 130 yards allowed against ULM and what they can do against Arkansas. Logan, it always comes back to this offense for Ole Miss needs to carry the day. The passing game needs to click. Tiamu needs to be on the mark. The receivers need to catch the ball, not drop it. And more to the point, in these SEC games, they need to make contested catches. Against non-conference opposition, well, those plays are not contested physically like they are most of the time in SEC games. And these Ole Miss receivers, as talented and athletic as they are, and we see that most every week, they've got to make catches when the defender's with them step for step. And maybe that defender's going to get a hand up in your line of vision. You got to be physical enough to, get your hands in there and make the catch. And that's going to be the difference in this game, I believe. I'm picking Ole Miss because I think the teams are evenly matched. But, hey, you know how this Arkansas series goes. It wouldn't be surprising to see the Razorbacks convert like 5 onside kicks in the fourth quarter and get a win there in Little Rock. I will say, though, that Little Rock's been kind to Ole Miss through the years. The games that have been played there, the Rebels have an 8-6-1 lead in the series in Little Rock. Folks, that's it for this edition of Double Coverage, a production of the Daily Journal. We thank you for clicking with us today. Come back and join us next week.